Hi, I'm Karen Elazari, security researcher and friendly hacker. I'm here today because I believe it's time to reimagine security. And I think we can do just that by actually learning from hackers. That's because hackers know how to adapt, evolve, and harness any new technology out there. I should know. For the past 25 years, I have been fascinated with the hacker's world. It all started when I was a curious little girl who met her personal hero online. Her name, Angelina Jolie. When she starred in the Hollywood movie about hackers, I fell in love with the idea that through technology, hackers can be heroes too. So I started learning everything I could about cybersecurity and building my own hacker skill set. Since then, I have dedicated my life to show the world what we can all learn from hackers. And the truth is, hacking has dramatically changed over the years. It is now faster, easier, and more impactful than ever before. When I was first reverse engineering web pages back in the day, all I could do was get access to one web app, maybe an entire server if I was lucky. Today, it's not about hacking one localized system or endpoint, or even downloading an entire database. With agility and automation at our side, hackers can now traverse digital frontiers that span millions of devices, clouds, and apps. We're talking about an exponentially growing attack surface that is ever expanding, like an entire digital universe. I've seen firsthand how sophisticated criminal gangs exploit one system to gain access into dozens of organizations. Then they wait for the right moment to target those companies, partners, and customers. Just one cloud asset can now give attackers access to hundreds of web apps, containers, or connected services and APIs. So as hackers, when we explore a digital environment, we see many potential targets and opportunities, and the next starting point for our next line of attack. That is the threat landscape, and it is ever changing. Now, at the same time, most defensive approaches to implementing enterprise security have remained in the past. Defenders focus on a static perimeter, but from a hacker's point of view, that perimeter is gone. This is a change that has been happening for a while, and it was only accelerated by the COVID pandemic and the work from home trend. So now is the time to focus your defensive efforts wherever data and applications live, especially in hyper-virtualized, dynamic, multi-state computing resources and cloud environments. That's where the new perimeter is. And the incredible thing is that we all have an opportunity right now to completely rethink security and build dynamic security capabilities into the fabric of cloud environments. Paradigms like the zero trust model are all about gaining consistent control and visibility in the cloud, not losing it. That is exactly where I see future forward organizations and security teams going with their security strategy. I believe security is an ongoing journey. It's not a static destination. So the security tools you have need to be dynamic as well to match a changing world around us. It's time for you to adapt and evolve, just like the hackers do all the time. You can't remain static. We need to build the same kind of capacity for change into our infrastructure to match the agility of hackers. And it's all within our grasp. Today, you'll learn from experts at VMware and other leading organizations about how you can transform your security strategy. Whatever you decide to do with that knowledge, I hope you embrace security as a foundation for our shared digital future. Stay safe and enjoy the briefing.
Welcome and thank you for joining us. We know that security is a top-of-mind concern for you, and for good reason. As Karen explained, the threat landscape is rapidly evolving. In a commissioned study conducted by Forrester Consulting on behalf of VMware in 2022, respondents ranked security or data privacy as their top cloud-related challenge, with 64% citing security risk as extremely challenging or very challenging. That's why we're here today. Security, of course, is not a new topic. What is new is the explosive growth of multi-cloud environments. And while multi-cloud offers enormous advantages, it also adds new complexity. That's why VMware created cross-cloud services, a portfolio of cloud-native services to build, manage, and secure your apps across any cloud. Security is particularly complex in a multi-cloud environment. If securing your apps and infrastructure is hard enough in one cloud, imagine the challenge when you have several. The Forrester study found that 94% of organizations ranked implementing a consistent security posture across multiple clouds as the number one priority for the cloud strategy in 2022. Number one priority. And the problem is compounded with the increasing number of apps being deployed in the cloud, which are typically built with microservices that access hundreds of applications and APIs. It's compounded even further by so many users now working hybrid models across multiple devices. That is a lot of surface to defend. And as you know, there are dozens of great software companies that have risen to the challenge of helping you mitigate security risk, primarily with point solutions that tackle one specific aspect of security. And some do it well. But VMware's approach to security is different. Combating the latest generation of threats, such as ransomware attacks, requires a combination of visibility and context that VMware is in a unique position to offer. For more on this, here's my colleague, Tom Gillis.
Hey everybody, this is Tom. I'm the General Manager for the Network and Advanced Security Business Group at VMware. For decades, the industry has really thought about security as living in two primary places, the endpoint and the perimeter. So many customers will think, I have an EDR solution, I got a next-gen firewall, I'm good, right? Well, ransomware and the rise of state-sponsored cyber attacks have shown us that that is no longer the case. In fact, I'll argue that the frequency and severity of security attacks have gone up substantially in the past few years. So thinking of security in those two places is clearly not enough. We really need to think of a third leg of the stool, which is security needs to live what I call in the middle. And this is a term I'm using, lateral security. So we need to be able to understand how a user logs into an application, and then how does that application move with its inner workings? What are the dependencies? What are the piece parts that talk to each other? If we can understand the context of how an application is supposed to behave, it allows us to understand, is this real application behavior, or is this a ransomware attack that's trying to mimic application behavior? And so to help us figure out friend from foe, to figure out real application behavior versus anomalous attacks, VMware has introduced a global threat database that we call Contexa. Contexa allows us to gather telemetry from our endpoint devices, from our EDR solution that understands how users are behaving, from our ingress point, whether it's our SASE access points or a web app firewall, and through the east-west movement that we see in the data center all the way to the data itself with our data security products. VMware is unique in the industry in that we have the broadest view across all of this behavior, and applying advanced analytics to the telemetry that we get from Contexa allows us to figure out, is this the normal behavior that we expect from an application, or is this ransomware?
As Tom explained, we have built a threat intelligence capabilities that provides an end-to-end view of user behavior and devices they're using, the networks they're traversing, and what's happening inside application and how those applications interact with data. This visibility enables you to achieve a stronger, consistent security posture across your multi-cloud estate, helping you prevent and remediate attacks, not just at the perimeter and the endpoint, but laterally spanning everything in between. The bottom line, VMware sees what others don't, and therefore can help stop threats that others can't. Later in this briefing, we'll show you how VMware solution can help you secure the inner workings of modern applications and VM-based applications, as well as help you build a solid lateral security defense. You also hear from security thought leaders at Booz Allen Hamilton and the SANS Institute. But first, let's hear from a customer about how they're addressing security challenges in a multi-cloud world.
Hi, I'm Charbel Shalala from VMware Security Business Unit Leader for Latin America. I'm based in Brazil, And today we have Nicholas with us, the CIO from Lick, that is in Palo Alto today in our VMware studio to talk to us. Nicholas, thank you to join us. And first of all, tell me a little bit about Lick and about you and your role as a CIO into this company.
Lick have been in the market for more than around 20 years. We have around 28,000 employees. We work mainly with the CRM business, with the contact center. Right now, I'm responsible to make sure that the IT department bring all the new technology to help the business to grow up, to different themselves from the other competitors.
Let's talk about your IT environment, Nicholas. You've been moving a lot of your environment from on-premise to cloud. What factors led you to do that?
Last year, we took the decision to move to the cloud. Most of our infrastructure, we still have few infrastructure in our on-premise environment. But with the help of Google and VMware, we managed to move most of our environment to the cloud. What we guide us to do this was, of course, cost. So we were about to do a reinvestment in our on-premise environments, and also to take the advantage from what the cloud offered best for us. That is basically to be able to grow as fast as we want and take advantages of cloud technologies like APIs.
So let's talk about security specifically. You recently began to implement several VMware security solutions. What led you to do that, Nicholas?
In the commercial side and the relation with our clients, it's very, very important that we make sure that no data leaks from our infrastructure, that somehow we make sure that nobody are able to copy or to extract the data that our clients trust us to share with us the information. This is very important for us also. We are very concerned with what we saw the last year, the several cases of ransom invasions that we have in our clients and our competitors. Carbon Black was the obvious choice when we start to look. So we took the decision to implement Carbon Black, and like our previous experience with VMware, when we move all our on-premise environment to the cloud, VMware helped us in the implementation, and we were able to implement the solution in less than around 11,000 endpoints in 3 or 4 weeks. And right now we are working on some other technologies to make sure that we also protect the data and the applications that we have running in our infrastructure.
We talked about cloud and the challenges about the cloud. How you are seeing right now, how to make security when you use this kind of architecture, multi-cloud architecture or cloud environment, or still having the hybrid environment using on-premises and cloud, but especially for multi-cloud. For you, what is the big challenge to provide security for this kind of environment?
I think it's a very good question. Obviously, we try to take advantage for what each cloud offers, the best of each cloud, and we work right now with 3 of the biggest public cloud companies, and plus our on-premise environment. So it's to find a way to have a centralized way to see if all those different pieces of the environment or of our network is safe, is up to date with all the security that is required, the best practice we are using in every single endpoint or every single cloud. So I think be able to see all the security layers or all the security configurations, to have an ability to see in a centralized way. I think this is the main challenge, because, I mean, we know that these problems happen when you forgets very small piece of the environment of our network. Also, we need to protect from inside also. So it's possible to have people that for some reason want to explore our data in a way that we cannot allow to happen.
What advice would you give to other companies or to other CIOs?
We can never believe that we are 100% protect. So we need to be humble enough to see what's going on, what's new. We need to talk a lot with our partners, VMware, Google, and some other partners. There is always something that can be done better or more than can be done to make sure that we have a secure infrastructure and we are able to secure the data that run into our servers.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nicholas. I appreciate our conversation. I hope to see you soon. We are remotely by now, but I hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Implementing an effective security posture requires a combination of strategic planning and technical skills. And there's a lot to consider, especially in a multi-cloud world. This is where VMware's network of partners can help. Their security expertise can help reduce the implementation risk while accelerating your time to value. In our next segment, one of our partners, Booz Allen Hamilton, will share their insight from having worked with hundreds of clients on their security initiatives.
Hi everybody, my name is Chris Krugel from VMware and I'm joined by Thor Draper from Booz Allen today. Welcome to the show, Thor. Let's jump right in. Obviously, Booz Allen works a lot with both federal and commercial clients. And I'm just wondering, what do you see as their key security problems and challenges?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. There's quite a few problems out there today. Users are basically customers are out there basically connecting to the cloud for a variety of reasons, looking at developers, looking at utilizing the cloud native applications. And as a result, security becomes one of their biggest challenges. There's a lot of traditional mindset of on-prem that, when you go into the cloud, that seems to follow many of the implementations.
Do you see differences in the challenges that people face when they have to move to multiple clouds compared to a single one?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, one of the key challenges when you do the multi-cloud is that there's different security postures that exist within each one's or security controls. So how do you get all that telemetry? How do you synchronize your security posture between the multiple vendors that are out there? That is definitely a challenge. And we do see clients struggling with that in many cases. So, we've tried to kind of work with them to give a better and quicker way for them to analyze their security posture and maintain visibility into those environments that when any changes happen, they can react.
Of course, we like Zero Trust a lot. I know Booz Allen and you do as well. Maybe you can briefly define Zero Trust because there are different definitions around, and then tell us a little bit of where you see challenges in implementing a Zero Trust in a cloud or in an organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest, the big definition is, it's really what the NIST and CIS have put out there around the 5-pillar model. Booz has a 8-pillar model that what we really look at. One of the key reasons we have 8 is we emphasize the analytics and monitoring aspect of it and the automation and orchestration pieces, right? These are 2 critical components to making Zero Trust actually work. Our clients are struggling with understanding how to do this. We have some clients that have been on this journey for 2 years, and in that 2-year timeframe, they've done quite a bit of good work. However, they've not achieved Zero Trust, primarily because the organizations still behave much like traditional IT organizations. And that includes even in the cloud, even makes the dimension even harder. But looking at people, process, technologies, there's confusion on the technology side. There is people, challenges, and culture. And obviously the processes are in many cases very legacy. So we work with them to kind of understand and develop a way to collect that data in a rather efficient way, do the analytics, and kind of prep them for the key piece of being able to have just-in-time security, as well as the automation of allowing access based on Zero Trust parameters.
Would be interesting to learn a little bit more of, when an organization wants to work with someone like Booz Allen, how should they think about it and how can they approach you so they get the most out of it?
Yeah, absolutely. Any of the firms, but I can tell you specifically with Booz Allen, we've spent quite a bit of time of understanding what is happening. It's primarily from the government side with other commercial clients. And, so we have a pretty deep bench of folks that do analytics, that do, your traditional cyber, that do AI activities. So one of the things that we always encourage clients that want to engage us is they should think about the fact that it is definitely in both our interests that we get an understanding of the environment so that we can identify the gaps that are there. We don't want to have surprises occur after we start the work, right? So in many cases, that's where the challenge exists. So, gather as much information as possible, be very open when it comes down to the definition of what the work's going to be.
Thanks, Thor. Thanks for sharing the insights from someone who is out there in the trenches, trying to secure the multi-cloud journey of many of those organizations out there. Really appreciate for you being here today. Thank you, Thor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. I really appreciate it, and have a good day.
Back to you, Vittorio.
Our very own Ambika Kapoor will catch up with John Pescatori of the SANS Institute.
Thank you, Vittorio. And John, thank you so much for being with us here today. So let's dive straight in. For as long as I've been doing this, John, and I've been doing this for a really long time, most of the attention and the focus in security has really been at the perimeter and at the endpoint. But in the zero trust world that we live today, where we have to assume that the attacker is already within our network, that leaves a giant gap for us to find the attacker and evict the attacker before they can do major damage. So why don't you just get your perspective on that and your perspective on lateral security in general?
Well, first, a secure perimeter, a boundary between what's internal and what's external is still critical and is still a necessary starting point. And since endpoints like PCs are mobile, they need the same thing. They need boundaries when they're out naked on the internet. So that's a starting point. That was a difficult enough starting point for many businesses to achieve. It's not an easy problem. So first getting that stable, then the attackers said, okay, now we'll move to trying different things. And really the business units as well, they had needs for applications that had to go through the firewall, had to work with mobile employees, and the attackers followed the same paths inside. So it's a strong perimeter is still necessary, but obviously not sufficient. So the ability to deal with the speeds and the variety of applications on the inside is an important capability in detecting and doing threat hunting. Not just detecting attackers that are already there, but detecting them quickly when they get there is really important. Changing time to detect from days to hours has to happen or you're dead. You're never going to meet the business needs. You'll be in the papers every week. Getting hours down to minutes is the next thing that has to happen. So the ability to have security controls that can have visibility into the key attacks that are making their way through and taking advantage of the openings we have to put in to support the business is critical, and it's a game changer.
So John, like we are talking, NIST, also recognizes this, and they have published guidelines, but those guidelines really focus on segmentation. And segmentation is really important. It's foundational, but it stops the obviously bad stuff from happening. And attackers know that you might have segmentation in place. So what they're doing is using things like stolen credentials to start and progress their attack on legitimate channels. So what do you think we need to do? Do we need to evolve these standards more to include other tools and techniques beyond segmentation?
I think whenever you see guidelines from NIST or the Cloud Security Association, those are always just starting points for businesses. And when they're talking about things like segmentation, it's important to realize segmentation is not just drawing lines across the architecture. It's what policies are enforced both on those lines when traffic's passing through and also within a particular segment, what sort of traffic is applicable or acceptable. For example, in a segment where the sysadmins or developers are working, there's certain types of behavior we'd allow and certain user type behavior we shouldn't allow. The ability to recognize the difference in the use of an application, not just the use of a protocol, and the use of certain types of users is very key. So to achieve something like zero trust, we have to have a much better visibility into things like behavior, and we have to have much better false positive, false negative performance than we saw in the old days. And the final thing is we need to take advantage of some of the new capabilities of virtualized data centers and infrastructure as a service is giving us, where there's security primitives that can be implemented at the virtualization layer that sysadmins can't undo. Because we've known what to do in security, but there's been a lot of obstacles in getting it done when security did not have the ability to configure a switch or configure a server or make sure security settings stayed set.
Well, couldn't agree with you more. Like, you need the segmentation, you need to understand the connections that are legitimate or not, and then you need to understand the conversation that is taking place, the behaviors that are in place. To do a lot of this, whether it's at the perimeter, the endpoint, or lateral security, customers have invested in a lot of different tools. At the same time, the environments are shifting. It's no longer like all data centers and all the assets live on-prem. They're moving into multi-cloud environments. And all of this together is layering on a lot of complexity, and complexity is the enemy of security. So just want to get your perspective on, how should customers sort of approach this? Are there any guiding principles or advice that you would give them?
Yeah, before I address the complexity, there's opportunities here as we move to virtual data centers and the use of the cloud and infrastructure as a service as the cloud. All those tools, we've known what to do in security for a long time, and we've had a lot of tools. But it was always hard. Security did not have sysadmin access to the endpoints. We could not patch things. We could not make our agents, security agents, stay installed if sysadmins remove them in the name of performance or debugging something. When you start thinking about a virtualized world where we have a virtual administrator view, where we can make some security things permanent, they're always going to be baked in. Or even when we start looking at infrastructure as a service, the Azures and the AWSs of the world, they have built-in security internals that we can take advantage of that we never had the visibility before. So this movement to sort of all apps running on private cloud or public cloud, there's actually security opportunities to make progress there. Complexity is a key issue. Nobody's using just one cloud service. And the attackers are having a field day on misconfigured cloud services, just as they had a field day on misconfigured Windows and Linux and Sun servers going back for decades. So there's actually as big an opportunity to make advances in security here as there is an increase in the complexity and the threat.
So especially when customers approach like multi-cloud environments, how should they approach their tool set? Because it's really hard to say, I'm going to build one data center with one set of tools and then have a completely different set of tools in a different environment and still maintain, a consistent security posture. But this is what customers are being forced to do. We'd just love to get your perspective there.
Yeah, I think when it's hybrid cloud, where it's private cloud in the data center and infrastructure as a service is the public cloud, those are where the same tools should be used. The architecture should span across public and private infrastructure as a service, and that's the best way to go versus using different tools out in the cloud. When you start looking at use of software as a service, things change. So we start seeing a lot of API type security issues, and then there's an ability to where the APIs into the software as a service environment are used, there's an ability for us to inject security inspection there. And I think we'll find that the most successful programs will find the ability to choose tools that can run in the data center and in infrastructure as a service that also have that capability to do things like API security and behavioral inspection.
So before we close out, John, there's one more thing that I wanted to touch on, and that is really securing the inner workings of applications. A lot of what we've talked about is, north-south interfaces, but increasingly the APIs, especially for modern applications where the microservices all communicate with each other via APIs, need to be observed and protected. Any thoughts there? Any guidance there?
Yeah, I think when we start thinking about overall software supply chain security, whether it's all internal apps or using external apps or cloud apps, those API points are going to be very key, both in understanding how they work and having them be built, the communications to them built in more secure ways, kind of getting security built in and evaluating products based on the security of their services available. So this first step, obviously we're going to be forced to use many things that don't meet our rigid demands for secure applications. So the tools to be able to detect anomalous traffic or flat out things we know should not occur across APIs are going to be very critical.
Well, a great discussion, John, and thank you so much for spending the time with us and for helping our audience sort of figure out things for themselves as they put their architectures down for a stronger security posture in their environments. Thank you again for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
Now I am super excited to show you some software in action and make this real. In our next segment, Chad Skipper from our security team will show you how just a few of the services within the broad VMware security portfolio can help you mitigate some critical security challenges. Over to you, Chad.
Thanks, Vittorio. I'm going to show you how VMware solutions address some common security use cases around ransomware, API security, and misconfigurations. Let's start with ransomware. In this use case, we'll focus on VMware's NSX network detection and response and Carbon Black Cloud. NSX NDR can detect and prevent advanced threat actors from taking hold and ransoming your modern applications, VDIs, and workloads. In order to gain initial access to an environment, attackers often target your employees. In this case, we will see that through phishing, a backdoor is installed on the employee's VDI desktop, giving the attacker a foothold. Attackers then establish communications via command and control, move laterally to gain access to, for instance, a database, which holds the monetizable data. And we've seen with a lot of recent ransomware incidences, attackers exfiltrate data out of the organization and then drop and execute ransomware in the environment, in this case on the database server, which causes critical data to become encrypted, after which they demand payout. With NSX NDR, we can correlate individual events from the NSX Sandbox, a malware prevention solution, network traffic analysis, and intrusion detection and prevention solutions into a campaign which provides security operators the full story behind an intrusion and maps every event to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. The security campaigns view provides a high-level overview of correlated tactics and techniques we observed within the environment. In this campaign view, we see further evidence of 4 threats targeting 2 hosts. The attack stages align to the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and we see evidence of delivery of some malicious artifacts, communications via command and control, and lateral movement and exfiltration. Now let's have a look at the blueprint of the intrusion campaign, and let me rearrange this visualization a bit to match our network topology. Here we have our attacker on the outside, and here we have our VDI desktop and our DB server, so let me put it over here on the left. The first thing that we saw was the VDI desktop download a malicious file that was hosted by the attacker that was detected by our malware detection and prevention capabilities on the gateway and distributed firewall. Then our IDS at both the distributed and gateway firewall detected the dark side command and control session with the attacker. Our network traffic analysis then detected the network traffic anomaly, in which the attacker used the Eternal Blue exploit, a vulnerability in SMB version 1 protocol that essentially allows threat actors to move ransomware laterally through the network like we see here. And then we see exfiltration. The timeline view here helps connect the dots along the MITRE ATT&CK framework. First, the NSX Sandbox detected a malicious file download from an external source via phishing, and it ended up being the DarkSide ransomware. The NSX Sandbox does have preventative measures here and can stop this from happening. Next, we see the establishment of command and control via the IDS. Again, preventative measures can stop this communication. Our network traffic analysis then detects anomalous lateral movement via Eternal Blue, where it laterally delivered the DarkSide ransomware to the database server. From there, DarkSide command and control communications were established, followed by exfiltration of data via an encrypted command and control channel over the DNS protocol, which is an effective tunnel out of most networks. This gives us a complete network overview of the campaign as we have correlated and connected the dots of the threat activities we observed through the network. All of this without the needing to deploy any sensors in the network, without needing any hairpinning, without spans or tap, and regardless of network connectivity. So with this, we have completed our analysis and learned that this was not just a case of ransomware being executed on a database server, but we've learned that the attackers gained initial access via VDI desktop, were able to move laterally due to lack of segmentation, and were able to ransom and exfiltrate data out of the database. And not only do we have access to every packet, but we also have access to every process within VMware Carbon Black Cloud with the detection of the DarkSide ransomware on the VDI and database server. Let's start with Carbon Black Cloud's alert page, where security admins can filter out vulnerabilities, priorities based on criticalities, from low to critical. This gives them a realistic, prioritized method of dealing with risks and threats in the environment. Here we can see two critical alerts on the same DarkSide ransomware attack. The first alert detects the DarkSide ransomware exists in our environment and identifies this known variant. The second notification has higher severity as Carbon Black Behavior Engine also recognizes ransomware-like behavior from this VDI. As we can see, this attack has modified the OS registry to delete shadow copies. This will prevent admins to restore the host. Let's take some actions against this ransomware attack. With a click of a button, we can delete this application from this host or through the environment. We can also put this host under quarantine. Next, we need to know the extent of this attack. We can see the AI-centric process tree depicting what this DarkSide ransomware has done within our environment. We have identified the location from where the script was executed and what files were encrypted. Let's shift gears and talk about API security. It's important because APIs have become ubiquitous and part of the application's lifecycle management. APIs are the new attack surface, and for good reason. Most web traffic is actually API traffic. Let's touch on new applications frameworks. We increasingly see customers adopting applications based on Kubernetes and microservices. These applications are developed to be highly modular and scalable and are inherently multi-cloud. These applications can be accessed by any user from anywhere. So it is important to have a consistent security operational model. VMware Tanzu Service Mesh provides policy control and visibility for all communications among applications, end users, services, and APIs. A key feature that sets the VMware solution apart from other service mesh offerings is the concept of global namespace. The GNS defines the application boundary and provides seamless connectivity, security, visibility, and policy controls expanding to any Kubernetes cluster running on any cloud. Within a global namespace, the distributed services that make an application are auto-discovered. In this example, we see the Acme shopping app with a front-end UI, a product catalog, a cart, and a payment system deployed over a multi-cloud environment. All communications between the services are controlled to regulate access and segment the application. All the services APIs, including the API parameters and the API schema, are automatically discovered. Also, all the personal, identifiable information exchanged by the APIs are monitored and tracked to verify and control access to sensitive data. Let's access our virtual store through the front-end UI and shop for a product. With Tanzu Service Mesh, we track a complete transaction, from when an application end user makes a request, and as that request follows through the service mesh, including services, APIs, and data. If an incursion is attempted, it is identified, access to sensitive data is tracked, and the attack is stopped with the adoption of the right prevention policies. Customers can prevent and deny any malicious request that is found to contain attacks and or ties to access sensitive information, and deny any malformed request that does not have a valid API schema. Finally, let's cover how you can manage security and compliance risk due to misconfigurations in a multi-cloud environment. For this, we offer a SaaS solution called Cloud Health Secure State. With Secure State, you can quickly manage your security posture by detecting and fixing misconfigurations, prioritize threat alerts from cloud-native service based on risk and overall security posture, and shift left by testing configuration settings within CI/CD pipelines and building guardrails to mitigate risk. The best practices built into Secure State help cloud admins create a security compliance program. This includes out-of-the-box Kubernetes security best practices like CIS benchmarks and compliance standards such as NIST, GDPR, HIPAA, and many others. An intelligent risk scoring algorithm makes it easy to identify vulnerabilities. Here's an example of a violation. The EKS service account within the cluster allows access to a privileged IAM role. Unless corrected, anybody with access to resources in the cluster can have administrative privileges to the full cloud account. let's zoom in into one EKS cluster. We can detect and get insights into violations listed by rules or by objects. These views help investigate findings like an EKS node group within an IAM rule that violated EC2 privileges. We can drill down to learn more about a finding and then decide to remediate or suppress it. We also have deep visibility into misconfiguration risks across multiple services and resource types, including managed and self-managed Kubernetes clusters in a public cloud or data center. A cloud security admin can resolve violations and use automation to improve the security and compliance posture and to build guardrails to prevent mistakes. Each violation is assigned a risk score based on the potential blast radius. You can proactively identify risk, such as Kubernetes service account, with cloud accounts administrative privileges to prevent cloud hijacking. Thanks for watching our demos on how VMware delivers on the promise for a secure multi-cloud solution. Vittorio, back to you.
It is time to rethink your approach to security in a multi-cloud world. Remember, it's no longer enough to just focus on the perimeter and the endpoint. To differentiate friends from foe, you need to understand what's happening in the middle of your apps, cloud and networks. Thanks for watching. And before you go, subscribe to this channel for more updates in the future. And visit vmware.com/go/crosscloud to dive into the multi-cloud security services that you can start using today. Until next time, ciao.